Daniel Hayes wiped the grease from his hands onto an already stained cloth. As the faint hum of the highway echoed through his small garage on the outskirts of a quiet Texas town, the sign above the shop flickered. Half the letters burned out, but it was still enough for passing drivers to recognize it as a place for help inside. The air smelled of oil metal and effort, the kind that came from long days and even longer nights. In the corner on a worn-out couch, his 6-year-old son Ethan lay asleep under a thin blanket, clutching a toy car Daniel had fixed for him weeks ago. Life hadn't been easy for Daniel. Ever since his wife passed away 3 years ago, everything had fallen on his shoulders. Raising Ethan, keeping the garage running, and somehow making ends meet. Some days there were barely any customers. Other days he worked nonstop, but still struggled to cover rent and bills. Yet no matter how hard things got, he never let it harden his heart. He believed in doing what was right, even when life wasn't fair in return. That night rain began to fall steadily, tapping against the tin roof like a quiet warning. Daniel was about to close the garage when he noticed headlights flickering unsteadily as an old sedan rolled into the lot. The engine sputtered before dying completely. He sighed softly, glancing at the clock. It was already late, but he couldn't just turn someone away, especially in weather like this. Grabbing his flashlight, he stepped outside into the drizzle. The driver's door opened slowly, and an elderly woman stepped out, her movements careful and uncertain. She wore a simple coat slightly damp from the rain, and her face carried both exhaustion and worry. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late," she said gently, her voice trembling just a little. "My car just stopped working. I didn't know where else to go." Daniel gave a reassuring nod. "You're not bothering me at all, ma'am. Let's take a look." He guided her inside where it was dry and pulled the car into the garage. As he worked under the hood, he could hear the soft ticking of cooling metal and the quiet sound of the rain outside. The problem wasn't simple: a worn-out alternator and a few damaged wires. It would take time, and the parts alone weren't cheap. Daniel paused for a moment, thinking. He glanced toward Ethan, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the constant balancing act his father lived every day. Then he looked back at the woman who sat quietly, her hands folded, clearly anxious. "How bad is it?" she asked. After a while, Daniel hesitated, then gave a small, calm smile. "It's nothing we can't fix." He got to work immediately, using spare parts he had been saving, and carefully repairing what he could. Instead of replacing everything, hours passed, but he didn't rush. Every bolt tightened, every wire reconnected with care. For Daniel, it wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about helping someone who needed it. Finally, the engine roared back to life smoothly. Daniel wiped his hands again and walked over to the woman. "You're good to go now." Relief washed over her face. "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much," she said. Standing up, "How much do I owe you?" Daniel shook his head without hesitation. "Nothing," she blinked, surprised. "No, that's not right. You worked for hours. Please let me pay you." He smiled softly, the kind of smile that came from sincerity. "Not pride, it's okay. Sometimes people just need a little help. That's enough for me." The woman looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand something deeper. Then her eyes drifted to the corner where Ethan slept. "Is that your son?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, he's my whole world." She smiled gently, a warmth returning to her expression. "You're raising him well, I can tell." Daniel didn't respond, but the words seemed to settle somewhere deep inside him. As she prepared to leave, she reached into her purse once more. But Daniel simply stepped back, shaking his head again, accepting defeat. She placed her hand over his briefly. "Kindness like yours doesn't go unnoticed," she said softly. Daniel chuckled lightly. "I'm just doing my job." But as the old car drove away into the rainy night, its headlights fading into the distance, Daniel had no idea that this simple act of kindness, one he thought would be forgotten by morning, was about to change everything. He turned off the lights, locked up the garage, and gently carried Ethan to the back room. The rain continued to fall, steady and quiet, as if keeping a secret of its own. Morning light slipped through the dusty windows of Daniel Hayes' small garage, cutting thin golden lines across the concrete floor. The rain from the night before had stopped, leaving behind a damp stillness in the air. Daniel was already awake, tightening bolts on an old pickup truck while Ethan sat nearby, pushing his toy car along the ground and making quiet engine noises. It felt like any other morning, simple, routine, and uncertain. Daniel's phone usually silent for hours at a time. suddenly rang. He paused, wiping his hands before reaching into his pocket. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. For a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail. Most unknown calls were either wrong numbers or people asking for services they couldn't afford. But something made him answer. "Hello, this is Daniel." He said. There was a brief pause followed by a calm, confident voice. "Good morning. Is this Daniel Hayes, the mechanic who owns Hayes Auto Garage?" "Yes, that's right," he replied, slightly cautious. "My name is Claire Morgan," the voice continued. "I believe you helped my mother last night. She had car trouble during the storm." Daniel straightened, slightly surprised. "Your mother, the elderly woman with the silver sedan?" "Yes," Claire said. "She told me everything, how you stayed late, fixed her car and refused to take any payment." Daniel gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "It was nothing. She needed help. That's all. It wasn't nothing." Claire replied, her tone firm but warm. Not these days. There was something in her voice that made Daniel listen more carefully. "I'd like to meet you in person." She continued. "Would that be all right?" Daniel hesitated, glancing around his modest garage. The worn tools, the faded paint, the reality of his situation. "Sure," he said slowly. "I'll be here all day. I'll be there shortly," she said, and the call ended. Daniel stood still for a moment, the phone still in his hand. Ethan looked up at him curiously. "Who was it, Dad?" "Someone important, I think," Daniel replied, though he wasn't entirely sure why he felt that way. Less than an hour later, the quiet sound of a sleek, black car pulling into the lot broke the stillness. It was unlike anything that usually stopped at his garage, polished, expensive, and out of place. Daniel stepped outside, instinctively brushing off his shirt. The car door opened and a woman stepped out with quiet confidence. She was dressed professionally, her posture straight, her expression composed but not cold. There was something familiar in her eyes. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked. "That's me," Daniel replied. "I'm Claire Morgan," she said. Extending her hand, Daniel shook it, noticing the firmness of her grip. "Nice to meet you." Her gaze shifted briefly around the garage, taking in every detail: the aging equipment, the cracked walls, the small space where Ethan now stood, watching curiously. "This is where you work?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded. "It's not much, but it gets the job done." Claire looked back at him, something thoughtful in her expression. "My mother hasn't stopped talking about you since last night. She said she told me how kind you were, how you didn't even consider charging her." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I just did what anyone should do." Claire shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "Not everyone does." There was a pause filled only by the distant hum of passing cars. "My mother," Claire continued, "has built her life believing that character matters more than success. She said she saw that in you immediately." Daniel didn't know what to say, so he remained quiet. Claire took a small step forward. "I run Morgan Industries," she said. "We own several automotive service chains across the state. I've spent years trying to find people I can trust to manage and grow them." Daniel blinked, surprised by the direction of the conversation, and then she added, "My mother met you." Ethan slowly walked over and stood beside his father, holding onto his hand. Claire noticed and smiled softly. "You have a family," she said. "He's everything," Daniel replied quietly. Claire nodded as if that confirmed something for her good. She said, "Because what I'm about to offer you isn't just about business. It's about stability." Daniel felt his chest tighten slightly. "I want to invest in this garage," Claire said. "Fully renovate it. New equipment, better infrastructure. Everything you need, and more than that. I want to offer you a leadership position in one of our regional operations." Daniel stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Why me?" he asked honestly. Claire didn't hesitate, because skill can be taught. Systems can be built, but integrity. She paused, then added, "That's rare." Daniel looked down for a moment, absorbing her words. For years, he had worked without recognition, without certainty, just trying to survive and give Ethan a decent life. And now everything seemed to be shifting in a way he never imagined. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. Claire smiled slightly. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just think about it." She reached into her bag and handed him a card. "This is my direct number," she said. "Call me when you're ready." Daniel took the card slowly, still processing as Claire turned to leave. She paused and looked back at him one last time. "My mother also told me something else," she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. She said kindness always finds its way back. Claire gave a small, knowing smile. I believe she's right with that. She stepped into her car and drove away, leaving behind more than just tire tracks on the damp ground. Daniel stood there in silence, Ethan still holding his hand, the business card resting between his fingers. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel uncertain, it felt possible.